This week on Indoctrination, I talk with Tamar Caspi and Nicole Bernstein, the founders of PeerK12. PeerK12 is a grassroots organization that supports parents in their quest to fight institutional anti-Semitism, both in the San Diego area where they're from and beyond. Hear a ton about the different incidents they deal with, the strategies that they use, and the successes that they've had in school districts, both in their community and across the country. Welcome to Indoctrination, the podcast that exposes and opposes radical ideology in K-12 schools and academia. Each episode, I talk with parents, students, and educators fighting for change. I'm Josh Weiner, your host. Join me and my guests as we shine a light on what's actually happening in K-12 classrooms and what we can do about it. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Indoctrination. I have Tamar Caspi and Nicole Bernstein this week. They are co-founders of PeerK12. PeerK12 has been around for, I think, longer than most other organizations, I think, that are dealing with institutional Jew hatred in K-12 schools. And I'm really excited to talk with both of them. We actually had to split this podcast into two parts because there's so much to talk about relative to what they've been doing. So today we're going to talk about pre-October 7th work, and then we're going to have another podcast in the near future about their post-October 7th work. So Tamar, Nicole, thank you both for coming on. How are you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, good. Busy. Very busy.
I know you guys are always really busy, as I know as well, because we're really busy doing our work, which is very similar to yours. So before we get started on like who you guys are, how you met, just tell us like the headline. What is PeerK12? What's your mission? And then we can kind of get into how you guys met.
Okay, sure. So PeerK12 stands for Partners for Equality, Educational Responsibility in K-12. You hear the PeerK as in PeerK a vote, and you also hear the peer as in your friends. And also in our logo, which we'll share, is that there's a Hamsa and an evil eye. We are here to ward off the evil of Jew hatred, indoctrination in K-12. So that is PeerK12. We got our start about 5 years ago when, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but basically when everybody was home because of COVID and getting to listen in to what their kids were being taught and heard things that we did not know were happening.
So tell me a little bit about both of you. Nicole, you start. Who are you? And then how'd you get involved? And then you guys can talk about how you met.
Okay, great. So I am originally from Texas, although my family is not from Texas. My parents are actually Israeli, and I'm the first person in my family on both sides to be born in this country, which I consider to be a huge honor. My parents met during the 6-Day War, which is a great story. And on my mom's side, my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. My mom was actually born in Germany in a refugee camp, a Jewish refugee camp. And my dad's family escaped pogroms in the Pale of Russia and immigrated to Palestine in 1928. And so my dad was actually born in Haifa, Palestine. So I like to open up most conversations with school district administrators by saying, you know, my dad's Palestinian and my mom's German and I'm from Texas.
It's very disarming.
And then we launch into it.
It's very disarming.
They don't really know what to make of it, but it just gives me a really unique background in terms of really understanding Jewish history, but not necessarily from a religious perspective. You know, Israelis are very secular, and I grew up in the States, but in a very secular home because we were Israeli. So I never went to Jewish summer camp, and we weren't members of a shul. You know, we went to Chabad, and like it's a different experience, I think, than the American Jewish experience, even though I sound very American.
And give your career background?
Oh, the good stuff.
Why are you uniquely qualified to be doing this work?
What did you do before we all went crazy to do this?
Yeah. Okay, so I started out in high tech, and I was a high tech marketing executive for more than 20 years. I made Aliyah in 2001, right before the second Intifada. I started my own company. I was awarded, top female-run startups in Israel of 2007, which was a huge honor as well. And then when my husband and I came back to the States is when I started noticing the big changes that had happened on college campuses. BDS had launched in the time that we were gone. We were in Israel. And I switched. From high tech to Jewish nonprofit. I was at Stand With Us for about a year. And then I went into AIPAC, and I was doing politics and lobbying Congress on pro-Israel policy at the federal level. And, these different experiences sort of all come together when, like Tamar was saying, we started hearing things in our kids' online classrooms. And even though our kids were a little young at the time, we had lots of friends whose kids were in middle school and high school, and they did not know how to handle a lot of what they were hearing. And because of my background, not only with AIPAC, but also my knowledge of Israeli history, I was able to kind of jump in and help with those types of issues. And we saw these trends happening way before anybody else really did. This was before ethnic studies was actually implemented in California. A lot of things were happening because of ethnic studies, but these things were happening even before that. So that's my unique, I guess, skill set that I bring to this. But, I like to say that every parent sort of knows inherently that there's something wrong. And the most important thing for parents is not to have, sort of a pedigree of, this background that is extensive, but like you need to be able to trust your gut and know that when something is wrong, it's wrong. And it is 100% the right thing to do to stand up and start asking questions.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. What about you, Tamar?
So kind of similar-ish background in that my father's Israeli. My mom met him. My mom's an American Jew who met him in Israel when she made Aliyah and was doing Ulpan on his kibbutz. And then they raised the kids here in the US, where my mom, as the American Jew, understood what Nicole's parents and my father didn't, was that you can't just be Jewish here because you're Israeli. You have to seek out a Jewish education and Jewish culture. And my mom comes from multi-generations of people active in the Jewish community. So we went to Temple, we went to Jewish day school, we went to Jewish sleepaway camp, all of that, and was really raised on understanding that we need to be active Jewish participants. My career background is that I got my start in journalism. I'm what I call a recovered journalist. Then I went into print, moved to Israel, and that's where Nicole and I met, actually. Her husband and I grew up here. And so I was just visiting and decided to move to Israel because I was in print. And so, you don't have to, even though it was, 2008, you can write from anywhere. So I was writing an internationally syndicated Jewish dating advice column, which turned into a gig with JDate and a book deal. And that then got me into writing human interest stories for Jewish publications. And then when we moved back here, got into more print and marketing and branding and SEO stuff. And when my oldest was a few months old, I heard about this Jewish charter school that they wanted to try to open. And a few months into trying to help them open it, they basically looked at me and said, if you don't take the lead and open it, we're just going to forget it. So I took the lead, and now there's a charter school that I founded 13 years ago. It is a Hebrew language charter school. So we have that as well. It is very, very diverse. We belong to a network of Hebrew language charter schools across the country. And it's a really, really successful charter school. So that led me to having really intricate knowledge of how school boards work. I was the school board president for the charter school for a number of years and worked with San Diego Unified School District, who's our authorizer, and it's the second largest school district in the state of California. So I really understand how the school board systems work. So when, again, we started hearing this stuff, all of a sudden it was like, wait, I know certain things that can and can't happen at the school board level and how to approach the school board level. And then also during this past 5 years, I started working more in PR. And so I kind of balance that. And both Nicole and I have boys that are going into high school this year. So we are in the thick of this ethnic studies. And then we have boys that are going into middle school.
So the real question is, like a good Jewish mother, are you still a good Jewish matchmaker working for JDate and whatnot?
I don't work for them anymore.
I know you don't, but
but yeah, sure. I mean, I do have some matches under my belt. Got my ticket to heaven.
There you go.
So you can see a Jewish matchmaker and, a syndicated author on Jewish dating and a high-tech executive from the mobile industry. Obviously we would go into pro-Israel, fighting anti-Semitism in schools. But it was interesting because with all of the experience that I had dealing with the federal government, I had never been to a school board meeting before 2021. Never.
So
didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
So tell us about sort of like how this all came about for both of you. I mean, I know we were involved a little bit in AB 101, Jewish Institute for Liberal Values, as we used to be. But tell me about your involvement and how you guys got together. It sounds like you met in Israel, but obviously you unified around this issue in some way.
Well, we had met in Israel, but we both moved back here and we're raising our families here and our kids are best friends. And so while we're not in the same school district and we actually live like 30 minutes apart, we've always stayed really close. And my family was involved in AIPAC, so we were involved in that capacity. But when we were home during COVID, basically, we had another Jewish mom who's an attorney who had been hearing about these issues, and she had older kids. And she tapped us because she knew that we would take care of it. She knew that we were the balabustas, that we were not going to let this go. And so she reached out to us and said, "Hey, ladies, have you heard about this? Can you help? Are you guys available?" And we both happened to be available. We were home with the kids. We weren't working in an office. And so we were available. And so we started looking into it. And Nicole is the type of person that starts research and goes down these rabbit holes. And yeah, our phrase is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And we're the type of people that are not going to just sit by and assume someone else is doing something about it. That's what happened in 2019 in California with AB 101. Everyone signed these petitions and called the governor, and 20,000, and he vetoed the first version of ethnic studies model curriculum and the second and the third. But then when we thought it was done, we thought we were good until we were told, no, this stuff is still getting in the classroom. These are what our kids in high school are hearing. Now we're also finding out these kids in college that just graduated also heard this. San Diego Unified has been doing this since 2016. So it's been going on for a while. And then you just have bad egg teachers that have been doing this for a while. And we knew that our kids were coming up and we had the opportunity to do something about it before it was literally going to be at our doorstep. And here we are.
So tell me, one of you, where did ethnic studies come from? What was it supposed to be? What was it actually? Especially the vetoed version, and why was it problematic for Jewish students, Jewish families?
Right. So I guess this kind of goes back also to what Tamar was talking about with the letter writing campaigns that we had all received. And this is something that it was a very complicated issue. And I remember getting, messages and emails from different people who were involved with Stand With Us at the time, with IAC, just a general Jewish community from all up and down California. And I would get these emails that were very, very long because it's a very, very complicated issue. And so, as with all things, right, that you're talking about when it comes to Israel, you can't just, it's not just like 3 words on a poster, like the other side has. You have to really go in depth and explain like, well, what is this exactly? And to be honest, when I first started getting those letters and petitions, I didn't really know what it was all about. It was very, very confusing. And I think what later we realized was that it was purposefully confusing because, as with all policy, unless you are willing to dig in deep and spend hours figuring out what the legalese in the policy means, you're not going to really understand it. And so what happened was we signed those petitions and we went off and I actually totally forgot about it until this mom tapped us. And I originally agreed to a coffee meeting with her with the expectation that I was going to go to coffee with her and say, look, I appreciate everything that you're trying to do, but I'm too busy to deal with this. And as she began to talk about it, it piqued my interest, but also my confusion, because what she was describing to me didn't fit the profile of anti-Israel. And I think that's where like my Israeli side kind of kicked in. You've got teachers at the teacher union level with names that were Hispanic, Latino names, leading the charge on some of this like very, very anti-Israel rhetoric. And that didn't track for me. And I think that's where I went into research mode. I needed to understand why. Why were they pushing this? Why did it seem so advanced, their anti-Israel views? And why was so much of it showing up in curriculum that was supposed to be about American or Californian multicultural diversity? And so that really started us on the path. And the more we dug and the more we uncovered, the more improbable and totally surreal it seemed that this was like a really very strategic, very long-term plan that had been put into motion in the 60s and was finally coming to fruition in the 2020s. And I was like, I feel kind of crazy saying that out loud. And I needed to figure out a way to explain it so that I didn't sound so crazy. And that was really hard. And so AB 101 is the technical term for the assembly bill that basically made an ethnic studies course, a semester course, mandatory for high schoolers in California to take before they could graduate. And so every high schooler in California was going to have to take 1 semester of ethnic studies in order to graduate in this state. That didn't seem problematic to me until we started looking at the material that was showing up in the classrooms. And off on this side, we were hearing from incidents in classrooms from friends of ours where the manifestation was happening. So it's, you're not going to see all of the bad stuff in all of the classrooms. It really depends on the teacher, on the district, on the materials that they're given, on, potentially, are there Jewish kids even in that district for them to flag it? Because there could be so much worse happening in districts where there's no Jewish students and they don't know the history, so they don't know that it's problematic. And that's really the worst part, is that there's no one there to flag it and it just keeps going. And who knows how long it's actually been going in some of these districts. It could be, in some cases, from the late 80s and early 90s. High schoolers have been taught these. So the bill itself was really problematic. It created a committee that was going to develop a model curriculum. And so what is a model curriculum? It's not a mandatory full set of curriculum with lesson plans that every school district was going to use. It was a set of that districts could then pick and choose from. But also, they didn't necessarily have to use that. They could use something else. But also, the district could assign teachers locally to create their own curriculum. But also, they could hire external consultants. I mean, it was so complicated. And every time, there was this one and this one and this, it made it so hard for us to narrow down what it is exactly that we needed to explain to parents on what to oppose. But then it's also really hard to explain to school district members and school board members and and superintendents what the issue is. So, you asked, what is AB 101? And you just thought I had to go into like a 20-minute tirade. It's like, because it's impossible to explain it succinctly. And that's one of the struggles I think that we've had. It's an organized indoctrination system, platform, way of thinking, ideology, pedagogy. There's lots of terms for it, but it's a way of changing the value system of American students. And I think that's probably the best, most succinct way that I can think to explain it is, how do you change the way that entire generations of Americans think? And you have to change their value system first, and then the thinking follows. And then the next thing that follows is their behavior and their actions. There, I might pause there for a second.
I mean, that was amazing. I think I haven't really heard it described in that way, really like changing people's values first and then the way they think around their values. I think that's a really interesting way to put it. And the interesting thing about these things too is the confusion and complexity is obviously on purpose, because then they can package these things as, we're just trying to make sure that the view of American history is seen through the eyes of marginalized communities. And that sounds so nice and
absolutely,
and peaches and butterflies, but then they're sneaking in these value changing concepts. So like
the idea of seeing yourself in the curriculum, which we're always like, that's history, that's US history. And why not just make sure that our history books accurately portray how our country was founded and how these different diverse groups, what they went through and why, in a factual way, fact-based.
And my understanding is that some of the original model curriculum was created by a group called the Liberated Ethnic Studies Consortium. Can you just tell me the difference between like the Liberated Ethnic Studies model and I guess what eventually got passed in California?
There is no difference, actually.
Okay.
And this is something that most people are really aren't aware of. So the committee that was created to design this model curriculum originally, obviously you would want experts in ethnic studies to be the ones to create a model curriculum, right? I mean, I wouldn't want just some Joe Schmo off the street to come in and start creating curriculum. So what they did was they went and found, although these people were already waiting in the, this was all part of the plan, the top experts in ethnic studies from across California. And these included professors from local universities, from the UC system, from the CSU system, teachers who were teaching social studies in high school districts, curriculum directors, things like that. And this group got together and they spent a couple years and they put together this huge, it's like 700 pages long model curriculum, and they have all these different units and things. And then they presented it. And Tamar referenced this before, but it was released and everyone was shocked. And it was not just the Jewish community. This is something that really has to be noted. There were all kinds of communities and people who were shocked that this was what the committee had created. And it got vetoed. And then they kind of had to go back and they had to remove a few parts or a few lessons that were really egregious. And they tried again, it was vetoed. And it was vetoed 3 times until they finally removed some of the worst of the worst. Okay. And then the rest of it was passed as is, with a caveat that there be some guardrails. And the guardrails were there to ensure that districts wouldn't use any of the materials that were explicitly removed from the original model curriculum. Now, the committee members who were chosen, who were the experts, were really upset that all of the authentic ethnic studies content was removed. Not all, but that some of was removed. And they said, unless you put everything that we originally put in there back in, we're removing our names from this document. And the state, to their credit, would not do that. And so what they did was they went and basically the entire committee, who created the first version, went and launched themselves as the Liberated Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Consortium. It's a very long name. And they launched a website. And the only thing that was on the website when it launched was there were 6 or 7 units on Teach Palestine. And that was it. And that's how they launched. And it was, we've got screenshots of it. It's no longer up on their website, but there's screenshots of it. And it's shockingly anti-Jew, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, anti-ADL. They called ADL a right-wing supremacist group. So it's the same thing. And Teresa Montano, who is, one of the leads there, she has multiple times publicly stated that the model curriculum that the state passed has more than 70% of the exact same content that they have currently on the Liberated Ethnic Studies website that they sell into school districts. So the only difference is a handful of the worst lesson plans and content was removed.
The most egregious stuff. And the most egregious stuff is what Governor Newsom said will never see the light of day. That's a quote. When he vetoed it, he said, this will never see the light of day. Except it is. And because LASMC or Liberated or whatever they change their names all the time. They're going to school districts where they can say, hey, we're the experts. Instead of using the state's curriculum, or instead of creating your own, why don't we just bring you an off-the-shelf curriculum and and consulting for professional development. Oh, and by the way, here's the price tag. Nicole, what's that line you like to use?
They are the worst Marxists in the history of Marxism because they charge upwards of $1,500 per hour for teacher training.
Wow. Yeah, well, this is like a really big problem because this is an industry and there's money tied to it. And that's part of the reason that there's so much pushback to extricate it from schools.
One of the challenges we had locally in San Diego was that, especially in the largest school district here, which is Tamar's school district, San Diego Unified, that district did not actually have to hire the Liberated Ethnic Studies people to come in because at least 5 of them are employed by the district as ethnic studies teachers, and they run the equity and belonging department in the district.
And they are on the Ethnic Studies Advisory Council that has figured out some gray area that the school board has no jurisdiction over them. It is just baffling that they've gotten away with all of this for so long, and nobody was paying attention. And that was a big problem, was that nobody was paying attention. And so we started paying attention. And one of the ways that we responded was to pass resolutions condemning anti-Semitism or affirming the rights of Jewish students, families, and staff. And so in those resolutions that we had passed unanimously in San Diego Unified, which I'll get back to in a quick second, as well as in San Diego, Sweetwater, and Temecula. We followed Amy Lesserman and her group who had done this in LA Unified, but one of the changes we made was that we did add IRA, the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. And so basically we said, this is the definition. You need to define anti-Semitism in order to condemn it, or prevent it, or have any type of consequences connected to it. So we added IRA, and we added also the controversial issues ed code, and talked about why these things that liberated ethnic studies, or just ethnic studies in general, and other ways that it was finding its way in through other subject matter, why they're not okay to teach, and why it is impacting Jewish students in negative ways. And interestingly, in San Diego Unified, where it did end up passing unanimously, Liberated Ethnic Studies rallied to oppose a resolution condemning anti-Semitism And one of the main people who spoke first is also the head of the San Diego Teachers Union, who is Jewish, a member of Jewish Voices for Peace, and a member of
As a Jew,
and a member
Jewish.
of the Ethnic Studies Advisory Council. So we went up against Liberated very early on in our battle to start to build the framework to be able to say, you know what, we can't fight this unless it's defined and unless there's some kind of resolution saying that you can't do this. So this was how we built the foundation of PeerK12 and getting into the district. And we worked with the school board members to write it and draft it and get it in a way. They tried to water it down, and we stood strong and said, you cannot water down a resolution. You cannot tell Jews how to define anti-Semitism. And so we got that passed in multiple school districts at the end of 2022. 21. Right, October
2021.
October 26, 2021 was the first one in San Diego Unified. And then because of the publicity that we got from that, because we mobilized the community, and not just the Jewish community, but people understood that the canary in the coal mine. And so they understood that what happens, if this is what the Jews are going through, then this is going to affect us later. And so we mobilized the community in huge numbers to sign petitions, write letters, call in, speak up at these different school district meetings. And then all of a sudden, we started getting phone calls from parents saying, can you help us? We're experiencing anti-Semitism in the classroom. And what do we do? And
how
nobody's
do we fight?
helping us.
Yeah.
And
what's
so
the next step?
You guys seem to know how to get things done. How can we use this resolution to support our kids?
Protect my kids.
So you were able to get like these petitions signed and these resolutions passed, which means that you were able to galvanize a lot of parents behind this. A lot of this is going on around COVID. A lot of the classroom work was happening inside living rooms. Was that sort of the context that helped? Were there other things that really contributed to it? How did you get that groundswell?
So one of the things also that happened in 2021, which I guess is eclipsed at this point, but in May of 2021, there was an incident, don't even know what the Israelis call it anymore, with Hamas in Gaza. And what happened in the States was you started to see Jewish people in New York City, in Beverly Hills, being physically attacked and harassed. And that was, I think, one of the first real sort of one-to-one connections that American Jews were seeing. Something was going on in Gaza. Jews in America are getting beat up. And that, I think, was very fresh in everyone's minds when in October, this ethnic studies bill passed. And, you needed 7 different guardrails on a bill, to try to make sure that districts didn't do any of the bad stuff that they were trying to prevent with this bill. And so that was like a huge red flag. But I think one of the things that helped galvanize a lot of people was it was shocking to see a Jewish man walking through Times Square and get, like a whole gang of people came and beat him up. I mean, it was national news, and this was really, I think, also the first time that anything was happening to the Jewish community that made mainstream national news in the US. And it's within that context that the ethnic studies bill passed, that parents were starting to notice all this really strange lessons happening or quizzes happening in their kids' classrooms that were online. And all of those things sort of came together. And I'll give you one example from that time period. There was a quiz. It was in 6th grade, a social studies quiz. And the question was, in which city, in blank, Palestinians are being forcibly removed from their homes by Israelis. And it was, Haifa, Tel Aviv, East Jerusalem, and I can't remember what. And so it has nothing to do with 6th grade social studies. And yet this was a question that was there, and it was an online quiz because school was online. And so the parent noticed it
and took a screenshot.
And when we sat down to look at it and to talk about it, we're like, how many of these have been happening and have continued to happen where no one, first of all, the kids didn't maybe realize that this was not okay. They were scared to say something. They were, they didn't want to go against their teacher. How many years has this been going on without us noticing? Because our kids didn't flag it for us, or we didn't ask our kids who would even think to ask specifically about that at the time.
But for these are the words you need to be listening for, which is what one of the things that we do as part of the training we do is like, these are the kind of words that you wouldn't think are anti-Israel, but this is the words that should grab your attention, like colonialism. You got to pay attention in how they're teaching that. But the other thing, Nicole, if you recall what happened was that, how do we galvanize? Is that we had proof. So we had a screenshot of that quiz. We had other parents coming forward. We had other screenshots, but we also then had the San Diego Unified School District's Equity and Belonging newsletter, an ethnic study for the Ethnic Studies Department that went out to thousands of teachers on how to teach the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Now, first of all, I don't really know why it should be taught. Second of all, the resources they used were as offensive as you probably could imagine, knowing the people that are doing this, right? So it was all a Teach Palestine materials, really, really egregious materials. We called them on it. They said, oh, oops, we'll remove it. And then months went by. We called them on it month after month. You haven't. So it's live on the website, on their school district website for thousands of teachers over the summer to be doing professional development and to be learning from these resources. And they said, you're right, but they didn't remove it. They said they're going to remove it month after month after month. They finally took it down. And so this is what led up to the resolution. Is one of the things that we added in there were the resources that you're offering, were the newsletters that you were sending. That was in late 21. We have caught them in the last 4 years. We have continued to catch them in the same newsletter doing the same thing. So even with this resolution, they're going to continue to do it until you call them on it. And then when you call them on it, they're like, oops, and then they'll remove it. But at that point, it's too late. It's in the inboxes of all the teachers.
Yeah, May 21 was really where it sort of all came together for me, because I was noticing these things happen in the progressive gay communities that I'm usually a part of in Chicago. I also traveled for work because I worked in tax sales, and I'd go to New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego sometimes. I was lucky to get to San Diego. But I'd speak with very progressive people about the weirdest topics like diet and vegetarianism and veganism, or like gender affirming care. And then these same people that were just disgusted to even have the conversation, like to just delve into these certain topics, were the same people that online were then calling me like a white supremacist Zionist for supporting Israel in the flare up with Gaza. And this is where I made the connection between these two things. I'm like, there has to be something here. And then probably like you, Nicole, or I'm like, okay, I got to go down this hole. And I went down a rabbit hole.
Why? We had, when parents started coming forward, some of the examples that they were giving us were so shocking. I think one of the ones that sticks with me still to this day is a student who was in 7th grade wore a hat that had the letters IDF on it. And it wasn't a branded hat. It didn't have the logo. It just had those 3 letters. This kid got bullied. They opened up the locker, they pushed him in, and they said, go back into your oven, dirty kike, okay, baby killer. Now, how many layers of Jew hatred can you count in one incident? First of all, that another 12-year-old, because that's how old they are in 7th grade, is 12 and 13, a 12-year-old, how many different forms of anti-Jewish sentiment can he or she be exposed to if they know what the letters IDF stand for without the logo, without anything else, right? They know the word kike, which I thought was had gone. I thought it was gone. Go back into your oven, baby killer, right? So you have multiple blood libel, accusations. And this is a 12-year-old. And it was shocking that the way that it was handled in the school district was not as a hate crime. It was, they were just messing around and it went too far. Okay. And every time we tried to sit down and explain and talk to the powers that be, whether it was the principal or superintendent or someone else, every single time it was downplayed, and it was sort of, we're handling it. You can't know what that means. And there are legal reasons for that in all school districts, which is fine. But it was never given any level of importance. And you have to remember, this is a year after George Floyd and the horrific, anti-Asian hate crimes. You've got this sort of flurry of hate crimes happening in America, and every single one of them was taken seriously, except the Jews. And that is what I think really got us angry, but then also motivated. It was like, what do we do with this anger? How do we fix this? How do we fight back? And every time to this day, someone says, tries to belittle it or something, I'm like, do not. All lives matter us. That is not okay when you do it anywhere, not to them, not to us. And that's a concept that's still very foreign, I think, to whether it's administrators or even parents are still to this day worried about escalating something or bringing something up because they don't want to appear, to be complaining
or
too much.
Insensitive to the plight of other minorities.
Yeah.
But
and that is really an interesting
you could totally
problem,
frame these things in a way to say, well, wait a second, if this was a black child and we used black tropes, what would the response have been?
Right. We try not to use the whataboutism, even though it's very apparent.
Well, this was my question.
Right.
Why not frame it that way, and why doesn't it work?
We have framed it that way. We have said, if this was a whatever, would you stand for this? And that does work often. And the reason, so we actually, after we unanimously passed the resolution in San Diego Unified, and we did that with the Legacy Org groups, and we did it. We had a letter with 50 Jewish orgs signed on that this was part of our efforts that we did. And then we went to the district in North County, San Diego, called San Diego, which is where Nicole is. And that's where we ran into issues where it became political, this is not political. Jew hatred is not political. We know the horseshoe theory. It's coming from both sides. And where we ran into it was where we had a Republican board member sponsoring the resolution. You had a Democratic board member who wanted to all lives matter the resolution. And what we said, and we had no Jewish organizational leadership behind us. We did this on our own.
Yeah.
And we did it, though, what we did have were the parents and the students, and Rabbi Cooper, the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And what we did do was we educated them on why Jew hatred needs its own resolution, because it's so nuanced. And we go over like Natan Sharansky's 3Ds, and we talk about the different parts of IRA, and we explain to them why it needs its own and why it cannot be the Rainbow Coalition, for lack of a better phrase, but we can't all lives matter this. And we had to talk to the superintendent about it. And we got to the point where they did agree. In that district, we ended up having 4 yeses, and the one board member who wanted to all lives matter it, she abstained because she said that some of her Jewish friends don't believe in Zionism. Okay. 4 years later, I wonder in the last 18, 20 months, if she would still stand there and state that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. We've always believed that it is. As long as your criticism of the state of Israel passes the 3D test, by all means, criticize the U.S. government. But we very explicitly explained the definitions of anti-Semitism and the nuances. And they understood. And in Sweetwater, which is by the border in San Diego in the South Bay, it was with a student and a teacher, and it was unanimously approved without even a Jewish student and Jewish teacher.
Yeah.
And it was unanimously approved with very little discussion. They understood, and their superintendent, Dr. Aguirre, understood so clearly why this is important and passed it without even, much conversation. They all just affirmed the rights of Jewish students and teachers and families and passed it.
What I find so fascinating about that district is that you don't actually have a large Jewish community or population in that district. It is the district, again, right along the border with Mexico. There are a lot of other issues that they're dealing with in that district. But they didn't push back on why this was needed the way that other districts that did have a larger Jewish community pushed back. And ever since then, whenever incidents have happened in that district, because we're under no illusions that we took care of it, there's not going to be any incidents. There are. It's how the district reacts when an incident happens that is very telling. And that specific district, both at the middle school and high school level, Sweetwater, and the elementary level, which is the Chula Vista district, every time something happens in that district, they reach out to us.
Except for one, which is more recent, which is like the post-October 7th. But I want to say what was interesting is when we went to...
They reach out and they want to connect and figure out how to use it as a teachable moment.
One of the things that we'll talk about it for post-October 7th was that when you have this, when you have teachers... sharing on social media really anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic things, and how does the district implement consequences there? And so that is something we're dealing with that district right now, which we'll get to in the other segment. But what was interesting with Chula Vista Elementary School District was they were doing all of their heritage months, and they didn't have Jewish Heritage Month. So we asked them to include it, even though you don't really have many Jews in your district. And their superintendent and their school board members said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many Jews. This needs to be included. And you're right. And not only does it need to be included, but we need curriculum with it. So they asked us to provide curriculum so that the teachers are not just being performative with their Jewish Immigrant Heritage Month proclamation, but that they can actually also teach about it in the classroom. So they've really understood the assignment there, which is very interesting because, as Nicole mentioned earlier, many of the leaders of Liberated ethnic studies are also Hispanic. So you've got these two factions of the Hispanic community. But we have been lucky that in the South Bay of San Diego, they have been really cooperative and collaborative and really understand the issues at play.
Yeah, this is a really difficult topic for Jewish people to explain to non-Jews, because I think anti-Zionism has been framed as, oh, I'm just criticizing Israel. No, the way I put it is Zionism is the Jewish people's expression of all people's right to self-determination. And you can really only be anti-Zionist without being anti-Semitic if you don't believe in nation states and all. And somebody I think I heard said that's naive and that's critical immigration. And
no, actually, that is, it's funny because I used to always say that as well until it started, until I did my super deep dive, and I realized that actually that is the end goal of ethnic studies, is no nation states. And I was like, oh, wait a second. So it's interesting.
Well, yeah. So critical immigration theory, which is part of critical theory, the idea is borders are an oppressive thing, and that, you get these kind of no illegal people on stolen land. Right? Their idea is really that we all share the land, which is...
Oh, I can go into the whole land acknowledgement piece, but yeah.
Anyways, I don't want to get too lost.
Yeah, they really do.
Because I want to...
But that's a thing. It's the indigenous right to self-determination, right? And you can even take the word indigenous out. people, humans have, or we believe, I guess in the West, that humans have a right to self-determination. And what we kept seeing over and over again was accept the Jews, right? And so as you start making these arguments and talking about it, it's like, but accept them. It's like, but why? Why accept them? Why not them, right? What's wrong with them having self-determination?
And why not point to Israel as the only and most successful decolonization effort in history?
Yeah. And I mean, this gets to also, people don't understand on the surface that Judaism is not just a religion, that it's a peoplehood, a culture, a tradition, that we actually have ties to the land. That would help. But also we're 15 million people. Like, it gets so difficult. But I'm really interested because I live in a very Jewish community. We're trying to get our community to adopt IRA, and it's very difficult. And I'm really interested to understand, why did this community just get it so quickly, and why did they seem to be understanding and also reaching out to you guys to say, we want to do this right? What makes them different than the other communities?
I have a theory, but well, Tamar, I want to hear yours first, and then I'll tell you what my theory is.
Yeah, well, so this resolution, that idea that we brought forth. We worked with the Jewish student board member. He's the student board member, happens to be Jewish. He also happened to have lobbied the school district to create a student board member position. His name is Zach. He's brilliant. And so we worked with him. And again, I think part of the reason, so already the resolution had been passed in LA Unified, and San Diego tends to do what LA does. They followed their lead in COVID, and they tend to follow their lead in a lot of things. So we already had that going for us. But again, that's when we entered in IRA. And because Zach had us working with him, and so when he went to work with the rest of the board on these edits and with the legal team, it was, here's the definition. You have to define something in order to use it, A. B, the U.S. government has adopted IRA. So, the Department of Education has adopted IRA. So you're not doing anything different here. And that's how we referenced it, was we referenced it as the definition that's been adopted by the Department of Education. The other thing that was interesting was that the co-sponsor is a Black woman on the school board who also very much understands what we're looking at here. She understands the overlap of the Black community and what they've gone through with civil rights, and the Jewish community, and how the Jewish community and the Black community work together. So we had these staunch advocates on the board that were not willing, with our support, to let go of this. Now, I don't know what would have happened if PeerK12 wasn't working on it. But I can tell you that it was a conversation. I remember it very clearly. It was Shabbat, and I was in Nicole's kitchen, and we had Zach on speakerphone, and he keeps Shabbat. So we were like trying to get through this conversation quickly. And it's the Shabbat. Our school board meetings are on Tuesday night. The board agenda comes out on Friday. And so then you have the weekend to look at what's on the agenda and to mobilize. And so, and we're working on these last edits, and we're like, you cannot take this out. And we explained why, and he got it, and he advocated for it. And in school board meetings, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that most of the action items that they're going to take are discussed beforehand. And so they're not discussed and against Brown Act. They do it separately, but they have different members of the board under a quorum speaking with the superintendent or the assistant superintendent or the legal team. Somebody's talking to them about what exactly the action item is and what their recommendation is. And so you have a recommendation coming down, and very rarely do they go against the district recommendation. In San Diego, by the way, all 5 board members are union backed, and the union did not take a stance officially against the resolution, but the head of the union did. And, so we were nervous. We were very nervous going into this, but we stood our ground. And I think that's part of it, is that you've got to have advocates who really, really understand what it is that you're standing behind and not willing to back down. And Nicole, what is your theory?
So I was actually referencing in Sweetwater, like the district that's on the border. My theory about that district, by the way, everything Tamar said about San Diego Unified is true. But the district that I think surprised me the most was the one that didn't have the huge Jewish community. There was the one Jewish student, the one Jewish teacher who brought their personal experiences forward of being harassed or intimidated, or the Jewish angle being used against them. But I think there were two things that still to this day really resonate with that district, and I believe that it has to do again with the value system. So when you have a district that is almost entirely made up of immigrants to this country who have come here for a better life and who are big believers in working hard and, being part of a new community and building something from nothing, they tend to see the Jewish experience as inspirational. Okay. There's no real logical reason, first of all, that Jews still exist on this planet, right? Everything in history that's happened, should have gotten rid of us long ago, right? I mean, it just, in every generation, there's some sort of extinction level event that we somehow manage to survive. But we don't just survive it. We come out stronger, and we somehow are able to see a positive way forward and latch on to the positivity rather than dwelling on the negativity. We use humor actually to dwell on the negativity, and we kvetch and all those things, but in actions we tend to where's the silver lining and how can I build from this? And I think that the value system of immigrants who come to this country looking for a better life, not just for themselves, but for their children and for their grandchildren, they recognize something to appreciate in the Jewish culture of not just survive, but thrive. And my theory is that that district has that going for them, and they viewed any assault on Jews that was targeting or discriminatory as almost an assault on their own beliefs of survive and thrive and work hard and do well. And I think that's one of the things, when you look across the country today, or even the world, the few people who are not Jewish, who are willing to stand up and push back on the anti-Semitism that you see, have that value system. And I think that's the secret magic sauce, right? That will bring someone in as an ally.
I'll give two anecdotal, backups of that idea. And again, these are anecdotal, so it's maybe worth studying a little bit and us testing in theory, just in our work. But you look at the voting geography of Zohran Mamdani, and a lot of the voting for him was actually from middle to upper class areas of
the white saviors.
Yeah, right. Also, in Highland Park, where I live, which is the most Jewish area in the Chicagoland area, we live next to Highwood, which is a very heavily, it used to be an Italian immigrant community, and then it became a Hispanic immigrant community. Now it's a more mixed Latino immigrant community. But the Hispanic immigrant community, when I was growing up, was very much blue collar. And they've uplifted themselves in this community to be much more white collar. They're business owners. They are very successful. They've moved a lot more into Highland Park, and they tend to be very outspoken against anti-Semitism and some of these issues. And we have some problematic schools further south in Evanston, and it bleeds up into New Trier. But there's been a bit, I think, look, we have problems in Highland Park and Deerfield, but it's been a little bit easier because we have a diverse student body, but also a diversity that comes from, I think, that value system that you're talking about, Nicole.
Lots of times I get questions from people who are in the non-Jewish communities, like, why is it that so many in the Jewish community don't see what's happening the way I see it, right? And they talk about themselves being, Christian or Latino or Black or, and I always say, I'm like, Jews are humans too. And, if you've been in this country for many generations and you've gone through the public school system, you're just as susceptible to this reprogramming of your value system as any other person would be. The identity politics is so different from what your identity is as a person. And I think that gets conflated a lot. And so we come up against it all the time. There's so many people in the Jewish community who are out there wearing keffiyehs and shouting about, how Israel is a apartheid state. And it's so frustrating, but also kind of obvious because they're humans. We're not immune to this. It's like I think the only way to gain immunity is to really sit back and think, like, are you going to let things that happen to you in your life, bad things that happen to you, stop you in your tracks? Or are you going to figure out how to overcome them and keep moving forward? That's the point, right? Of like, and they could be from any community. Their skin could be any color. They could have different color eyes even, it's like, that's not the point. The point is, how do you approach hardship? It's not that, no one's had hardship ever. It's how you approach it and how you overcome it. And that's, I think, where the sort of the line separates the people who are pro this notion of viewing the world through the oppressor-oppressed paradigm, or you look at it as what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Those are the two camps. And in each of those camps, you will have Jews, and in each of those camps, you will have Latinos, and you will have gay people and straight people and people with green hair and people with green eyes, right? It's like that. People need to kind of get past the superficial differences.
The issue is that as a Jews who tend to have zero Jewish value are the louder ones. And they're the ones drowning out. And the Jewish community at large, the Zionist Jewish community, accounts for like 90+% of Jews worldwide, are not organized. That's funny. I've said we're monotheistic, not monolithic. And like we're not, we're so like true. Terrible at what it is that we're being accused of something that we're not, which is the victim mentality. And, we don't want to be seen as the victims. And so therefore we're not complaining and we're not rising up as we should be. And we're allowing these outliers to be the loudest. And, they represent a very, very small population of the Jewish community. It's funny here in San Diego, JVP is like, I would say like 90% of them are not Jewish even at all. And of the Jews that are part of them, they're not involved in the Jewish community whatsoever. Interestingly, now that I think about it, when we were passing that resolution in San Diego Unified, JVP started distributing a flyer in the high schools. And it showed the U.S. colonization and the colonization of Israel over Palestine, and showing the different maps of like,
the green map with the
and they were
the green, so they had one for the U.S.
Wow.
And they were passing this out and posting it at San Diego High School. And luckily, again, we had a Jewish student that got one. And initially, he pulled it off the board and scrunched it up, and luckily, he thought to keep it. And so we have a picture of it with the JVP logo in it. So these are the people that are out there spreading lies, misinformation, trying to indoctrinate people who are moldable. That's the issue right here, is that one of the things that we said, and I know we'll get to this in a little bit, but all the college encampments that happened after October 7th, those kids didn't wake up and decide to be anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic. They were indoctrinated early. You get to these kids when they're still moldable and they're completely naive, because why? I don't remember learning anything about this in high school. But they get to them there and they start dropping these little nuggets along the way, so that when they get to college, there's no more discourse in college. If you have a dissenting voice, you are persona non grata. And so that's what we're dealing with right now.
It's I got as a Jew at Gay Pride a couple days ago, actually, for having an Israeli flag. So that's fun. I also think it just has to do with like the underlying anti-Semitism that we experienced as kids, or at least I did, that you don't really think about. It's sort of subversive, like the idea that you're not athletic, you're just you have to lean into your brains. It's all about money and success, and you have this pressure from your parents, and then we're teaching kids that they need to lean into, based on their intersectional identity, victimhood or guilt. And Jews that come from very privileged areas, it's natural for them to say, well, to do good, I should feel guilty about who I am and give up my privilege for others. And then that
they buy into it,
and then that's their badge. And their badge involves actually telling the other people in the Jewish community that what you're doing is racist, bad, et cetera, for these reasons.
One of the things that we started saying is like, tikkun olam sounds really nice, but we have spent so many decades doing this whole tikkun olam concept of repair the world and take care of the world, that we've got to take care of ourselves. And so now it's that phrase of like, put on our own oxygen mask before we help the rest of the world. We are not thriving in that way as a community, in the way of having to prevent what's going on now from happening. And so in that capacity, we're not thriving. If we controlled the media and the banks and everything, then this wouldn't be happening right now.
Yeah, we're horrible at it.
We're really, really bad at
Okay, we're horrible at apartheid. We're horrible at controlling the media.
We're really, really bad at genocide. And so if we were, and so in that regard,
not as smart as we think we are.
In that regard, we're not thriving because we forgot to like look at ourselves. We had gotten so successful in so many ways that we forgot about the actual like Jewish values, Jewish community, and what our perception of us is in society. Assimilation came at a cost. And so now we're dealing with the after effects of that. My whole life with Jewish camp and Jewish school was and temple was tikkun olam, tikkun olam, tikkun olam. Well, we need to repair the Jewish community before we continue taking care of everyone else.
Just to circle back, by the way, to where we started the conversation, that is a completely different experience to like the Israeli American way of thinking. Like, and also the Israel, like tikkun olam was not something that was a big part of, my Israeli upbringing. And it's not that it doesn't matter, but tikkun olam for me always meant like, you have a responsibility to leave things better than how you found it, right? But it wasn't specific to other, like we're fixing things for everybody else. It's like in your space, what you're doing, you better not, leave something behind that makes it worse. Like you better either clean up or fix it. And to that point also, I think there has been a little bit of a profile of the parents who are willing to be sort of loud and proud in school districts to kind of counter the as a Jews. And I'm seeing more and more post October 7th, more and more American Jewish parents really, just finally walking away from the docile kind of, attitude. But pre October 7th, which is what we dealt with for a long time, it was not. And it was usually either an Israeli family, someone who was Israeli American like me, either moved here when they were very young or born in this country, or immigrants, Jewish immigrants to America from usually a communist bloc country. And that was something that we experienced in my district when a year after we passed the resolution, we had a pretty severe incident in a history class, 7th grade history class. It was like a landmark incident that I just saw recurring across the country in Virginia.
Yeah, I saw this.
Almost exactly the same incident that happened in my district in September of 2022. I don't know if we have time for that, but
We talked about the stuff that happened in June 21 and San Diego Unified. So like between 2020, like basically 22 to October 7th, parents are calling you for support. You're really empowering and supporting parents with tools and strategy to deal with things. What's going on in classrooms? Like, tell us some of the stuff.
Well, this was also during the time that a lot of school districts in California were starting to grapple with how to implement ethnic studies. Some districts had been doing ethnic studies either as an elective or had their own mandates. San Diego Unified, the second largest district in California, did have a requirement that was mandated in the district. So it didn't actually matter what happened at the state level. It was already mandated for those students. And there's over 100,000 students in San Diego Unified. By the way, Los Angeles Unified, which is the largest, also had it. And there were a number of other districts who had that. Now, when we would have incidents, I will say that many times we were getting calls and updates from parents. And the first thing we always say is, how do you want to handle this? Do you want to go public with this, or do you want to keep it quiet? Because it's really important what the parent is willing to do, because it's their kids on the line here, right? And so I think that's a huge difference between us and maybe some of the other orgs. Is like we will wait and follow the lead of the parent in terms of what they want to do. Do they want to, go all out, or do they just want to report it to us so that we know that it happened? And maybe once their kid has, maybe during summer or once their kid has graduated, we go back and try to deal with it.
Or do they want to
the
be
one
kept
thing
anonymous,
that we do know
which is
is
something that we're able to provide to them?
Yes. And sometimes that's really easy to do in a district like San Diego Unified, where there's 100,000. But then other times when districts are really small, there might not be that many Jewish students. And so if you have an incident, it's pretty obvious who the student was who,
right.
flagged it.
This is one of the
Right.
reasons
And so,
that
but that's
K-12 is so hard, because college campuses get a ton of attention because these kids have agency. Like kids in K-12 schools,
they're making the decision on their own.
They don't, and they need to rely on their parents. And there's a lot of laws around privacy that are not in colleges. It's very difficult and fraught with just like these power relationships that make it almost impossible to do anything without putting your child's education at risk.
100%. And I think also one of the main issues is how do you prove it? Because that's the first thing that is always asked of us, at least the Jews, is, well, that didn't really happen. You misunderstood what the teacher said, or the student didn't really understand that the teacher meant something else.
Why don't you dive into Carmel Valley Middle School? Because I think that's a great example.
Yeah, specific example would be great. Yeah.
The best example is a Jewish student, 7th grade, 12 years old, again. In 7th grade in California, part of the history curriculum is, they go through history up until 1914. Okay. In 8th grade, they go from 1914 on. So both World War I and II are handled in 8th grade, not in 7th grade. And the reason I'm saying that is because in this middle school 7th grade history class, there were, they have like decorations up in classrooms and stuff the teachers do. And there was this bulletin board that had about 8 photos of world leaders from all different, places. So you had MLK Jr.
Who wasn't even born
you
yet.
had Gandhi.
Who wasn't even, MLK wasn't even born
up to
yet.
1914. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. You have Gandhi.
Eleanor
you have
Roosevelt,
Churchill,
JFK,
JFK, and Hitler. And there's Hitler on the board. And the students come into the classroom and leave the classroom. They're there, for an hour and 20, 3 times a week, and then come in and out. And school starts in August, late August here. And so end of September, this kid comes home and he says, Dad, there's a weird picture in my classroom. I don't really know what to do about it. And the dad's like, well, what is it? He tells him the story. And the dad's like, well, it's probably there because of, the lesson plan or, going over World War II. And his son's like, well, but we're not even covering that this year. And then the dad was like, all right, well, you need to say something to the teacher in a way that you feel makes sense. And so he kind of put it into his son's hands of how to handle it
child, which I love.
Which is rare, right? But so he did, and the student went and said to the teacher, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't understand why this picture of Hitler is up in this classroom. It's not connected to anything we're doing. And also, it really trivializes the history of all of those who were murdered by him when you have him placed next to people like Gandhi and MLK Jr. and JFK. And the teacher said, well, that's not my intent. I don't mean to trivialize. And the student said, but you are. And I still don't understand why this picture is up there. So first of all, you've got a student with some serious chutzpah, right? Some good chutzpah. But he said it in a way that was very respectful. He wasn't loud or obnoxious. He's like, but I just don't understand. And my mom's family was very heavily affected. The entire family perished at his hands. And you're kind of putting him up on a pedestal here, with these other leaders. And she said, well, again, I'm paraphrasing. Hitler may have done some bad things, but he had great leadership qualities. And at that point, this 12-year-old is like, so what are his options? Does he continue to argue or push back? This is his grade. A teacher has the position of authority in the classroom. He's sort of advocated for himself, he thought, as far as it could go. And then when the teacher said that, I think it was also a little bit of shock, right? How could a teacher say that?
I'm 37. I don't know that I would be able to just gather myself to say the right thing. So, yeah.
12. Okay. So he goes home and his dad is like, how did it go? And he told his dad what the teacher had said. And the dad was outraged and wrote what I thought was a very calm email, far more calm email than I would have written, saying, to the teacher, listen, I understand what happened. This is unacceptable. I would like to request a meeting with you and have a discussion about this. Please let me know. Nothing. Wrote another email to the teacher the next day. Nothing. Wrote an email to the principal.
Meanwhile,
didn't hear
still
back.
up in
Called.
Class.
Yeah.
As far as we know. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Up in class. Called and emailed the principal multiple times. There were 5 business days between his first reach out to the teacher, but certainly the principal. Nothing. Finally, the principal gets back to him and says, yes, I'm willing to have a meeting, come in. So he comes in and she listens and says, well, I'm sorry your son had an issue with the curriculum, but this picture is in, whatever the picture is, it's up there because it's part of the curriculum. And I can't, I'm not going to take it down because a student has a personal issue with it. I hope you understand. And the parent said, I absolutely do not understand. And he said, look, if there's nothing you're going to do about this, then take my son out of this class, put him in the other. There's 2 options in this middle school for a history class, this teacher and another teacher. Okay. So she moves his son to the other classroom. He's mad. He doesn't know what to do. He submits an incident report to the ADL and kind of, leaves his number and everything and says, call me about this, and doesn't hear back. So a friend of his hears about this and says, oh, I have a friend who works at, NBC here in San Diego. Would you be willing to be interviewed? And he says, yeah, sure. Let's do it. I mean, why not? He gets interviewed. I get the segment sent to me by about 8 people. Are you guys involved with this? And I said, no, I am not. And I was pretty shocked at, the story that was told on the news. And I said, if you got this from the parent, have them reach out to me. I don't want to impose, but if they want help, we're here. And an hour later, I got a phone call from the parent. And we started talking to him. And I said, look, you have two options. We can continue to try to take care of this quietly with the district, or we can try to be a little bit more forceful. And he's like, let's go all out. This is unacceptable.
But he did the right things. First of all, his kid advocated for himself. Then he went to the teacher. Then he went to the principal. He did everything he was supposed to do.
Everything, yeah.
Which is what we still tell parents
according
to do.
to all policies.
So that's your view,
There's
right? Like
you
got to give the teacher the opportunity. You got to go up the chain, essentially.
Yeah,
yes.
we go in the order of that you are supposed to do this because, like you said, give them the opportunity.
The principal, he said that in that conversation with the principal, all the principal had to say to him really was, I don't know why it's up there. I'm going to look into it. Thank you for reporting it to me and letting me know. And had she done that, he probably would have forgotten about it. Okay. Because he's busy but it was the total dismissal of it being even a thing that stuck with him. And then the refusal to remove it. And so the NBC piece, went live and he reported it and nothing happened. So to us, he said, yeah, this is not acceptable. They can't treat parents like this. Certainly they can't have things like this up in a history class. And so I said, okay, well, are you willing to, go to the board meetings? Are you willing to have meetings with them? Are you willing to be public with this? And he said, of course, why wouldn't I? And the reason I was asking is because pretty much every incident before that we had dealt with, none of the parents had been willing to be public about it. But I think this was so egregious that he was like, the only thing that can make them or force their hand to do something is to go public. So
that's when we took this NBC piece, NBC7 San Diego, and we had it go viral because with the parents' permission to let's go. And so we got the NBC7 piece and the parent, and we went to Jerusalem Post. We went to Stop Antisemitism, and this thing went viral because you have to get it to a point where the school district can't ignore it. They can't pretend like it didn't happen. They can't sweep it under the rug. They can't check off boxes and say we dealt with it. And so we had to make it into something bigger so that they couldn't ignore it. And then from there, of course, now it's viral. And so now we are organizing the community to rally behind this family at the school board meeting. So we did a petition, we did a rally with signs, we packed the board meeting, we had all the news there, and we had talking points, and we trained the parents not only to speak in front of a board meeting and how a board meeting goes, but also how to speak to the media because people wanted to interview parents. And then, of course, we also had to go to the board and ask them to put it on the agenda. They refused to put it on the agenda as an action item. They put it on the agenda as a discussion item, which forced them to have to discuss it.
This is more wonky. Yeah. This is more wonky stuff in school boards, right? All these procedures and, what is the difference between an action item and an information item? And parents don't know this. I mean, it's so in the weeds, I guess, of.
And the rules can be different district to district too. Yeah.
Before we went and blew this up in the media, we asked the district quietly to enforce the resolution and to handle this. And we also did not hear back from them. And so this is where you see this, it's a systemic ignoring of the issue, even when the parent and we as advocates and also parents, I'm also in this district, are asking for the district to invoke their own policies to examine what happened, figure out how to avoid it ever happening again and, making amends. It's all within their ability to do. None of this has to be escalated to the point of, 2 million views on Stop Antisemitism, right? It's like that didn't need to happen. But their absolute refusal to take this seriously created a situation where The students' rights were not upheld. The parents' rights were not upheld. The community's rights were not upheld. So at that point, with enforcement being, not for the Jews, not for our issues, that's when you have to sort of stand up and say, Tikkun Olam, you cannot treat us this way. We have rights. We know our rights. And we will be using our rights to speak and speak very loudly. And I think one of the things that really maybe surprised us was the instant support that we had from the non-Jewish community in this district. It was instantaneous, and it was so big that, I think, Tamar, you had a difficult time having only a handful of parents to speak to the media because so many of them were wanting to say it. And we had an additional issue that all of this was happening right around the time of Yom Kippur. And so to try to mobilize all of this and handle all of this while also going into 25 hours of, Yom Kippur was a big challenge. But that's where the Asian American parents in our district kind of picked up the baton and kept running with it while the entire Jewish community, including us, were offline for that time. And we ended up having, I think it was 1,200 names on this petition, and 25% of them were not Jewish. And what was interesting to me is that the 25% who were not.
And that was in like 25 hours, by the way. We did it. It was like Yom Kippur, and we got it out before Yom Kippur, and then we needed to get it to them because remember, it's a board meeting, and you have when they post the agenda and when you have to submit things for them so that it goes into the material.
The agenda,
and they don't make their schedules for Yom Kippur. That's for sure.
But they don't make their schedules. Even in the Jewish community, when you have a meeting on a Tuesday night where the agenda is posted Friday, it's Shabbat. So, I don't personally keep Shabbat, but I am very respectful of those that do. So it's just like you're going into, this, and this was a Thursday night meeting in Santa Guido, but it was, so it was Yom Kippur, but still our allies who understood the danger of what was happening, they took the baton.
They were there for us.
And they came to the board meeting and they spoke. And these are immigrants, and they felt very empowered. As they also felt very, and there was a win-win because you had Israeli and Asian parents where English was their second language, and they were empowered by each other because they saw other people go to the podium and speak, and they were like, "Oh, well, they don't speak English very well, so they can." So they did it too. And so it did. It became, and we were at the bottom of the agenda. It was like 11 o'clock at night. We had a Jewish community leader screaming in the background saying that the boy was lying. We had an election coming up where the Jewish board member was on the ballot. We had all the press there. We had a room full of.
This sounds like a really bad movie, by the way.
No, look, like I've been to these board meetings. They're like,
how many things?
We had a new interim superintendent. We had a Holocaust survivor who was so upset, and she stood up and started yelling, and then was told to be quiet. It was by the same Jewish community leader. It was.
We should make a movie about this.
You can see, by the way, the pictures from that we still use to this day because it, everyone showed up. They showed up for what they could and how they could. And so what we also discovered through this whole process, we called the PeerK way, was that parents can do what they can. So some of them signed and shared the petition. Some of them also showed up for the rally that we had beforehand. Some of them also stayed in the audience and held the signs up for as long as they could, considering that we were at the beginning of the school year. People had school the next day. People came, people stayed the whole way. People spoke. So we had different people filling different roles. And so what we discover is that, look, and so this is what we tell parents, show up in the way you can. And then oftentimes they see other parents doing other things and they're like, oh, I can do that too. And so we had that was our big way of discovering what we were able to do in an organizational capacity of activating all the parents and not only Jewish parents, but our allies in how they could stand up. And for many, many of them, it was their first ever school board meeting. I will give credit to that district, is that because they're not all teacher union backed, there is actual discourse and there's debate. Whereas like in my district, they all just pat each other on the back and do what pretty much do what the teachers union tells them to do. But in this district, it's not. And there is debate, and there's usually the fifth seat. It's usually 2-2 with a fifth person will sway the vote one way or the other. And while it could be very dramatic and it's not always like very positive, at least they have debate. And so again, the same board member, I want to give a shout out to Mike Allman, because the same board member who brought the resolution forward condemning anti-Semitism was the same board member who fought really hard to get this item on the agenda. And although it was not an action item, which is what our petition asked for, it was still on the agenda as a discussion item. So it did eventually get to us, and we did get the opportunity to all speak at the podium. We did get the facts out of what happened and how it was mishandled. And all we were asking for was that they implement the resolution and protect Jewish students.
Okay, very brief.
It was a big issue of transparency also, right? And the cover up, that districts tend to do. And I think this is something that most districts really don't understand is we don't believe that there's not going to be another incident in this district. But, if you don't stand up for yourself, no one is going to stand up for you. It was that they saw us all standing up, and the Asian American parents were inspired as well to join in because they realized, and many of them had come here from China and from Vietnam, and they're like, it could have been Mao on that board. And maybe people didn't know what had happened, but that would be equally offensive and bad in a way that, Hitler was. It was a moment of parents coming together to protect each other's kids and demand transparency and accountability from the powers that be. And that was really powerful. And it's really stuck with the community here is look what we can do together. And while at that specific meeting, we didn't get exactly what we were wanting, there was a domino effect that happened in the district afterwards. There was a whole discussion about a Jewish parent committee to help guide the district on some of these more sensitive issues that are very nuanced. And there was a whole debate that happened on that, which we can get into later, or some other time.
Also the debate
but
about
it
curriculum,
forced a conversation.
Because the principal said it's in the curriculum and it wasn't, we then said, well, you said it's in the curriculum, show us the curriculum. Because the law says that we have access to the curriculum, but districts will not show you. They don't want parents involved, even though Ed Code says that we do have access to the curriculum. So this was the perfect way to say, hey, you said it's in the curriculum, show us the curriculum.
Right.
Show us.
And lo and
but
behold,
they wouldn't. It forced so many of these issues to sort of have front and center, tons of media attention. I mean, there were I think 6 local stations, the ABC, NBC, right. CBS, the newspaper.
But
this went
international. What we did not do was we did not call for the teacher or the principal to be fired. We did not call for that. We asked for them to have professional development. We asked for them to have this as a learning experience. Once again, the Simon Wiesenthal Center said, bring them to the Museum of Tolerance. We did not ask for them to be fired. We were accused of asking for that, but we did not. Interestingly enough, both subsequently since then have been let go from the district because this is not a one-off. People who spout the type of things that this teacher and principal did, this was not a one-off. This is a pattern of issues that this teacher and this principal, because with union, you very rarely can ever fire a teacher, but when they have a number of offenses, suddenly you can. So this was a pattern of issues with this teacher and this principal that subsequently led to them being let go from the district. So, we raised a flag about them, but we never demanded they be fired.
Yeah, often when you shine a light, there's more to see. And what I've found too is with these individuals who are, I'd say, especially bad actors and are especially leaning into activist education, it actually emboldens them to be worse. So uncovering it is really in of itself sometimes will help you solve the problem. Not that there's not more work to do. And another thing that I just want to point out is oftentimes people think that you need hundreds of really active and involved parents to make this work. And that's just not the case. You really need a tight core group of parents that's dedicated to this, that has a network of ones that are a little bit looser and a network of ones that are a little bit looser. And I love your concept of, I forget exactly how you put it, but like show up how you can or where you feel comfortable. And then people see other people doing things and they come to the table in different ways than they even anticipated. And that's a really important thing that it seems insurmountable, but if you look at it in that model, it really isn't.
100%. And I think for me also, it was very interesting to see how communities outside of our own jumped into action to support us without us having to go and ask for it. We're bonded, we're family now with these other parents, and in a way that, you know, they saw us and we felt like someone understands why we're upset and is saying, you have every right to be upset. And I think also the way that we showed up in our anger wasn't obnoxious or loud or mean. We were like, this is the law. Please enforce it. These are the protections we're owed. Why are you not enforcing it? This is the policy of the district. Why are you not doing anything? We were sort of shining the light on, what are we asking for here? We're asking for you to do your job. That's it. If it's in the curriculum, then investigate the curriculum. Why would you fire a teacher if all that she's doing is following curriculum? That's not fair, right? Now, if it is in the curriculum, get rid of it. If it wasn't, why did the teacher do it, right? But that's the district's issue to deal with internally. All we said was, how did this happen? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And it was the fact that we weren't willing to just let it go. And the incident that is now making the rounds because there's a massive lawsuit in West Virginia is basically the same example. And I wonder if that school, even though it's a private school and this was a public school, and so maybe there's some differences, but how systemic does this broken value system have to be for something to happen in Southern California in 2022, and then basically the same thing 3 years later in West Virginia? It shows up.
I mean, also this one in Seattle that was recent. But so I really...
But the Hitler has good leadership.
That's specific.
The picture of Hitler with good leadership skills. Yeah.
It
was like
we're used to dealing with
like influenced by us making it go viral. But, it was this interesting thing between the newsletter from the Ethnic Studies Department at Santa Unified and this Hitler situation in San Diego. We now put the districts on notice that we're paying attention. And we not only are paying attention, but we're doing our homework and we're understanding what your district laws are, what your district codes are, and what the state education codes are and the federal ones. And we are going to hold your feet to the fire, for lack of a better phrase, to implement them to protect Jewish civil rights. And it's the consequences that are been more difficult to get. But now they at least know. They've been getting away with it because no one goes to the meetings. No one knows what ed code is. And, it's a jumble of letters and numbers and, legalese. And now you've got, AI where you just are like, TLDR, tell me what this really means and how I can use it to protect myself. and it is.
Could have used that in 2021, 2022, 2023.
But now we're like, okay, but we did that. We showed up at that board meeting and we said these, and even our resolutions, here are the ed codes that say you can't do this. You can't do this. Yeah. We're paying
very
attention.
pragmatic. Yeah. So, Nicole, you mentioned just like getting other communities to show up. That's something that I really want to dive into in our next conversation.
Yes.
One like last question before we wrap, just briefly. In the time between like 2022 and October 7th, 2023, like how much work are you guys actually doing on these issues? Is it like weekly we're working on stuff? Incidents are coming constantly? Is it sort of like not so like, just give me a sense.
Okay, so this is 24/7,
Yeah.
365. And by 24/7, I mean
Before
we
October
often
7th, it's
will have
24/7.
Yep.
before October
Yeah.
7th. And what was interesting is after we passed the resolutions, we started, there's the Jewish community, we're 1 degree of separation. We started getting calls and texts from parents all across the country. I heard that you did this from a friend of mine who lives in California, and we're dealing with something here in New Jersey. Are you able to talk with us and walk us through what you did? And there was a lot of that. And
And this
before
is before October 7th, so there were no parent groups. These were just one-offs calling us and saying who had that 1 degree of separation that said, the Jewish geography that was like, how did you do that? How can you help us?
How can you help us? And we started coaching parents all across the country. And what was really fascinating, and this is something that we sort of knew just by dealing with the districts here in San Diego. By the way, San Diego, 42 different school districts, not including private schools or charters. 42. Okay. So, and every district has its own board. So they're their own island of political power in that district. Each one is going to be different and unique, and there's nuances. And what works in one district is not necessarily going to work in another. And so we had to train parents how to approach the issues and create a strategy that would work for them based on the common denominators that we had learned dealing with all the different school districts in San Diego. And I think that's also something that is really misunderstood. There's no such thing as a one size fits all. And oftentimes in other states and other cities, the allyship with other communities, I tell people all the time, find the people who have the same value system as you. It's not about finding them necessarily in the Jewish community, although that would be amazing. But don't just limit yourself
It's
to
not a
that.
Jewish problem.
Find other parents. Yeah, find other parents who want merit-based education, who are upset if there's different rules for different communities, affinity groups. How do you decide who gets an affinity group and why are you segregating, kids? Like, this goes so far beyond the Jewish community. But yeah, we were doing, it was 24/7. Oftentimes you have, different parents in different time zones. They work full-time jobs. So you have to, be there for them in the evenings or the weekends. We're juggling our kids. By the way, both Tamar and I had full-time jobs before this, and we both left those full-time jobs
After October 7th.
After October 7th. And I was like, I can no longer do this 24/7 and hold down a full-time job. It has to be the main focus. We can talk about that next time because it really does kind of tie into October 7th. I thought we were busy before.
Right. Prior to October 7th, so we did have teacher trainings and community trainings that we were doing where it was fully based on ethnic studies, where we're telling them what to look out for, like the word salad of oppressed oppressor and genocide and apartheid. But we're telling them what to look out for. And this is before October 7th. We're telling them what the reporting mechanism is. You go to your teacher. So we're training them on how to advocate for yourself. That, of course, will be there for them. We're happy to always go with them to meetings. We're happy to get, a letter writing campaign. And again, before October 7th, when you have all of these like WhatsApp groups and stuff.
It's a whole
we
different
were
world
doing
now.
it all then. We were working a lot with like IAC and Stand With Us. We're great partners. But I will say that one of the major obstacles we ran into was that because we went forward with some of like the resolutions and even the fighting of this Hitler picture fiasco against the wishes of the legacy orgs, the broader Jewish community leadership in San Diego, we became persona non grata, and we did not have their support. And so we were doing this without their backing. We were doing this for free. We were doing this 24/7, a lot of nights, a lot of weekends. Board meetings are at night. Teachers that we needed, we have a number of teachers that we've worked with even before October 7th. They're not available to talk to us during the day. The kids are in school, the parents are at work, and so we were very, very busy. And yeah, this was before October 7th. What we were kind of doing back then, which we are trying to do less of now, and we're much more like organized now because we have to be. But what we were doing a lot back then was whack-a-mole, and we were doing webinars, we were doing in-person events, but we were naive. But I will say what's interesting is that we were told we were crazy, that there was nothing to see here. We were told that our concerns were not founded because they're having conversations. Post October 7th, that completely changed. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, they were right, and now we're not only decades behind, but now we're a couple of years behind, where we could have had a little bit of runway back when PeerK12 alerted us in 2020, 2021, 2022, and we told them they were crazy, and now we're like, oh, shit.
Yeah, and the problem with that is it's not something to celebrate once everybody gets around to it. It's like, okay, let's go. But to your other point about the legacy organizations, that's a whole different problem that really gets in the way of things.
We would have loved to have been proven wrong.
Yeah.
We would have loved nothing more than to have been proven wrong. Right. But also knowing who we are, we wouldn't have gotten into this if we weren't so certain about what we saw. And that's what we couldn't get through to them, was that we're not irrational people. We're fighting this because there is something there that is very dangerous, and it's only going to get worse. And we, unfortunately, were right, and we were proven right in the most horrific of ways.
Just one more comment. Sorry. It's to that point is I grew up hearing the stories from my grandparents, before the Holocaust. And one of the questions I always asked them was, how did people not see it coming? There were all these signs, all of these losses of privileges and rights. And, like you suddenly can't go to this university and there's quotas and, all these things. And the same response sort of came was, we thought it was bad, but it would, if we just kind of like hung back, it would go away. We thought it was fringe. We never believed that Hitler would actually take power. There was sort of a naivete then of, this seems really bad right now, but there's no way that it could get any worse. We have hindsight at this point. And so when all of the signs are pointing in one direction, and the vast majority of the legacy Jewish organizations still had their head in the sand, my question to them was, have we not learned from the past that even if we are overreacting a little bit, which we weren't, isn't it worth looking into a little bit deeper? And I think there was whatever it was that was holding them back, that they didn't want to dig deeper, maybe because they really couldn't believe the depth and the breadth of this, which I can understand. It was hard for me to believe it at first as well. But then knowing what to do about it and how to fight back, I'm not so sure that the Jewish legacy orgs are equipped for it, because they're focused on Jewish life and Jewish community. And this is a whole different can of worms. This is politics, school districts, this This is a political problem that created this, that's manifesting in education. It's not, oh, if you just teach, show these people what the Holocaust was, they'll see how bad it is. And
They won't
they'll
be Jew haters.
It's not
stop
even
doing
just
it.
teach Jewish identity and we solve the problem. That's not what it is. And they're politically constrained, and they could be great partners if they partnered with organizations like Navi, like PeerK12, like others in ways. But yeah, those constraints make them.
There's that element that they're not equipped to deal with the way that Navi and PeerK and others, grassroots like us, are equipped to deal with it. But like you said, they can support and help. But I don't know.
All right, so there's
that's its own little podcast.
Right. We could split this off into 12 different podcasts, I'm sure. PeerK12. we'll do K through 12 podcasts on the issue. But thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Nicole. We'll get into the new paradigm of after October 7th on our next show, okay? Thanks.
Sounds good. Bye.
Thank you for watching. If you like the podcast and wish to support our work, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our social media channels @Navi Values.